everyone. Thanks for attending. I'm going to be talking about the Pebble Project and where we are and where we're going to be going in the next short while. Here's the, as I like to call it, the cautionary and forward-looking information, or the admonition. So let's get going quickly. We're at booth 300, so please come by and see me to get filled in on a lot of stuff. I mean, first, this is probably old news to most people, but with the electrification of fundamentally everything, copper is the key metal. It's the most critical. In order to produce electricity, you need copper. In order to aggregate electricity, you need copper. In order to transport it, you need copper. In order to manage it, you need copper. And in order to use it again, you need copper. And the world is basically breaking even today on copper production. It's anticipated that we'll have a shortage of somewhere between 5 and 8 million tons per year by 2030. And based on a current 23 million ton a year production, that's a huge shortage. Bank of America sees copper potentially at $20,000 a ton, which I dare say would probably be $8 to $10 U.S. a pound by that time. And I was part of a group that hired S&P Global to do a white paper on the future of copper and the expectation of being able to make our many nations carbon commitments by 2035 and 2050. And fundamentally, there is no way, unless there's a tremendous amount of resurgence. CRU was out on Friday and said that we need to build 8 Escondidas by 2030 to meet those targets. And there aren't 8 Escondidas out there. It's the largest operating copper mine in the world. And we can't get 5 copper mines built in the United States. Here's the Pebble resource. It's the largest mineral resource in the world. You can see it there between the measured and indicated and the inferred. We had gone into permitting based on a 20-year mine plan using 1.3 billion tons in that 20 years. That's about 10% of the total resource, or a little more than 1/5 of the measured and indicated. There's more copper in this deposit than any other 2 deposits in the world, 84 billion pounds. There's more gold in this deposit than there is in the state of Nevada, and there's many other critical minerals and metals. I love this picture. Picture's worth 1,000 words. This is what the Pebble resource area looks like. You don't see any glaciers, running rivers, lakes, and the like. It's about a 25 square mile valley with very little water in it and mainly broken or shattered tundra rock. So where are we today? We went into permitting in 2017, late 2017. We produced, or the Army Corps of Engineers produced one of the best final environmental impact statements that I've seen in my 25 years in the business. That became the official record in June of 2020. And unfortunately, shortly after that, I'm going to say for political reasons, a negative ROD was issued. And a ROD is the actual permit. So while we had the best FEIS, the best conclusions on this project to date, we still lost on the final permit because of political interference. So we filed an appeal against that, and we're expecting the decision on that appeal in the current quarter, probably. So what was the main function, or the main issues related to that appeal? Well, number one, they said that it wasn't in the economic interest to develop this mine in the region, that most of the benefit went to the developer. The reality is this is the poorest economic region in all of the United States. Employment levels are about 30%, and the FEIS itself said it was desperately needed, this project, for this region. State of Alaska and the area would get hundreds of millions of dollars a year in royalties and taxes. The other thing they said, it would have a negative, the ROD decision, that is, it would have a negative effect on water quality. The FEIS actually says that we would have no impact on local water or regional water or the water in Bristol Bay. And that's because the mine anticipates building 2 very large reverse osmosis water treatment plants, and so every gallon of water that will be discharged will be treated to state of Alaska standards. However, they totally ignored the fact that we were proposing 2 water treatment plants. They said that it would impact negatively subsistence fishing in the area. Once again, the FEIS said there would be no impact on subsistence fishing, no impact on the numbers of fish or the quality of fish in the region or the commercial fishery in Bristol Bay. And finally, they said that likely due to human error, there could be a catastrophic tailings failure, which would have negative impacts on fisheries, water quality, and the Bristol Bay fishery. Again, the FEIS said that the Army Corps of Engineers and their independent contractor, AECOM, could not envision an event or a series of events of any kind that would result in a catastrophic tailings failure. So on all points of the rejection, the FEIS, which is the record that the decision has to be based on in law, was opposite. So we're expecting that this will be taken into account in the decision, the administrative appeal that we'll hear from later this quarter, I believe. In addition, the EPA, who's been basically chasing this project, and might I say, not just this project, but all the big projects in the United States. I mean, there's 4 very large projects in the United States. Pebble is obviously the largest. Resolution in Arizona, Rosemont in Arizona, it's now called New World, Twin Metals in Minnesota, and Polymet in Minnesota. All of those are under some form of attack by the executive branch of government, preventing them from proceeding into production. And the reality is somebody in the United States must love buying all their copper metal from China, because that's where it's all going to come from. The S&P report said that currently the United States buys 45% of its metal from third parties, most of it, at least 50% from China, and that by 2030, as much as 80% would have to be bought from offshore. So it's not sustainable, and it's not onshoring supplies. So the EPA announced last spring that they were going to make a proposed determination, and that just is legal language for they were proposing a veto under the Clean Water Act to deny dredge and fill or mining in an area that's 309 square miles in total. And that's interesting because, I mean, first of all, we had a negative ROD, and the way the Clean Water Act works is when the decision on a ROD is made, it's handed over to the Army Corps of Engineers, and if it's a positive ROD, then the the EPA has veto right, the 404C veto, and that veto can only be used once the positive ROD is told to them. Well, we had a negative ROD, and now they're proposing to impose a veto. That's like 2 negatives. I mean, if they veto a negative ROD, does that mean the ROD is positive, the decision is positive? It's really bizarre and beyond belief. The other thing is, given that it's a negative ROD and we can't go ahead under 404, how do they propose issuing a veto on that? So, I mean, they're not vetoing anything specific. Plus, they're proposing to veto 309 square miles. Well, their veto does not relate to regions. Their veto relates to specific proposals. They have to veto, if they're going to try and veto, the specific project that we put into permitting. And their veto also has to be supported by the FEIS. What they have put in for the record on which to make a decision is a bunch of speculative reports. Nothing scientific, nothing factual. There's nothing in any of the reports that says this will happen. What they say is this may happen. And the reality is, if they can't point to something that says that will happen, then their veto isn't sustainable. I mean, they talk about the importance of the fishery in the region and the impact we're going to have. The reality is the fishery has not supported this region at all. The entire region is the poorest county in all of the United States. Employment in the region is, like I said, about 30%. Unemployment is 70%. So how can they say that the fishery has been a benefit and this mine wouldn't be a benefit? We achieved a royalty financing last year. It's going to give us $60 million. Yes, we're going to have lots of litigation to pay. It comes in 5 stages. It's on the gold and the silver. It will, in its totality, take about 10% of the gold. That's about 35,000 ounces a year. And it'll take about 30% of the silver. And that's less than 2% of the deposit. And when we deliver those metals, they'll pay us $1,500 an ounce for the gold, $10 an ounce for the silver, and that'll give us plenty of liquidity to see us through for the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. Thank you.